On August 4, 2025, the United States Supreme Court delivered a landmark decision that would reverberate across continents. In a historic ruling, the court struck down the legal foundation of the Trump-era tariffs, a set of trade barriers that had defined global commerce for years. The announcement sent immediate shockwaves through global markets, as investors and traders scrambled to interpret the implications of the court's bold move. Wall Street surged in response, with stocks rallying on hopes of renewed international cooperation. Major exchanges from London to Tokyo echoed this optimism, as the world's financial centers adjusted to the new reality. This wasn't just a minor legal adjustment, it marked a fundamental shift in the balance of presidential power over trade policy, redefining the limits of executive authority in economic matters. Commodity prices for steel and aluminum recalibrated almost instantly, as years of uncertainty from the trade war finally began to lift. Manufacturers and exporters worldwide braced for a new era of competition and opportunity. The ruling was the culmination of years of legal challenges from businesses, trade associations, and industry groups. They had long argued that the tariffs were arbitrary, harmful, and exceeded the president's constitutional authority. The Supreme Court's answer was clear and decisive, a resounding no to unchecked executive power in matters of trade, reaffirming the role of Congress and the courts in shaping economic policy. Now, the world is watching closely as policymakers, economists, and business leaders scramble to understand the full impact of this seismic decision. Governments across the globe are reassessing their own trade strategies in response. For some, this moment signals a long-awaited return to the principles of free trade and open markets, promising new opportunities for international collaboration. For others, especially within American manufacturing, it raises concerns about increased competition and the potential risks to domestic industries and jobs. One thing is certain, the next chapter in global trade is just beginning, and its story will be written by the choices made in the wake of this unprecedented Supreme Court decision. To understand today's ruling, we must revisit why the tariffs existed. Launched in 2018, the Trump administration's tariffs targeted steel and aluminum, aiming to revive U.S. industries deemed vital to national security. The administration argued that reliance on foreign metals was a risk in times of conflict. The tariffs made imports more expensive, hoping to boost domestic production and jobs. The policy soon expanded, escalating a trade war with China and targeting hundreds of billions in goods. Critics warned the tariffs would raise costs for U.S. manufacturers and provoke retaliation, hurting farmers and exporters. The debate raged. Were tariffs a shield for American industry or a self-inflicted wound? This controversy set the stage for the legal battle that reached the Supreme Court. Now the rationale behind the tariffs is under new scrutiny. The Trump tariffs relied on Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act, letting the president impose tariffs if imports threatened national security. Traditionally, this power was used sparingly, but the Trump administration broadened its meaning to cover economic threats. Critics argued this was never Congress's intent, and that it let the president bypass legislative authority. Lawsuits challenged whether courts could review the president's national security claims or if it was solely executive discretion. Lower courts were split, fueling uncertainty for years. The Supreme Court case questioned whether steel imports from allies truly threatened U.S. security. Evidence showed military needs were a fraction of domestic production, casting doubt on the national security claim. The plaintiffs asked the court to restore Congress's role in trade policy. The Supreme Court's 6-3 decision set clear limits on presidential power under Section 232. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that while the executive has discretion, it's not absolute. There must be a direct link between imports and a real security threat. The court found the administration's broad definition of national security overstepped, granting the president legislative power reserved for Congress. The ruling narrows Section 232 to its original, targeted intent. Justice Kavanaugh warned that unchecked executive power could spark damaging trade wars. The dissent argued the president needs flexibility to respond to economic threats, but the majority insisted on constitutional checks. The decision signals future administrations will face a higher bar for imposing similar tariffs. The debate over the balance of power in trade policy is far from over. The Supreme Court's decision sent ripples through American industry. Automakers and construction firms cheered, expecting lower material costs and more competitive pricing. Stocks for companies like Caterpillar soared on hopes of higher profit margins. Domestic steel and aluminum producers, however, called the ruling a devastating blow, fearing a flood of cheap imports and job losses. The United Steelworkers Union urged Congress to act quickly to protect American jobs. Small and medium manufacturers face a new reality. Some welcome cheaper inputs, others worry about increased foreign competition. The ruling forces businesses to rethink sourcing, pricing, and strategy in a changed marketplace. For some, it's a long-awaited relief, for others a source of deep anxiety. The U.S. supply chain is bracing for rapid change. The future of American manufacturing hangs in the balance. Internationally, the Supreme Court's decision was met with a complex blend of relief and caution. Around the world, leaders and diplomats watched the announcement closely, understanding that the ruling could reshape the global economic landscape. For many, it signaled a possible end to a period of uncertainty that had strained alliances and disrupted trade flows. The European Union quickly hailed the decision as a significant win for rules-based trade. EU officials emphasized that it reaffirmed the importance of international agreements and legal frameworks. In response, the EU began lifting retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, a move welcomed by businesses on both sides of the Atlantic who had suffered from higher costs and market instability. Canada and Mexico also welcomed the move, viewing it as a fresh opportunity to restore stable, tariff-free trade with their largest trading partner. For these countries, the decision offered hope for renewed economic growth and a return to predictable cross-border commerce, which is vital for industries and workers alike. Yet, years of trade volatility have left many U.S. allies wary. The memory of sudden tariffs and shifting policies lingers, making partners cautious. Many are now calling for stronger, more binding commitments from the U.S. to prevent future protectionist measures and to ensure that the rules of trade will be respected going forward. In Japan, government officials echoed these concerns, urging the United States to adopt a more predictable and transparent trade policy. The scars from recent disputes have not fully healed, and Japanese businesses remain vigilant, hoping for greater stability in their economic relationship with the U.S. China's response was measured and strategic. While Chinese officials noted that the Supreme Court's ruling does not directly affect the separate tariffs imposed on Chinese goods, they acknowledged that it could open the door for broader negotiations. Beijing is watching closely, weighing its options. In the coming months, Beijing is likely to push for further tariff rollbacks, arguing that the Supreme Court's decision undermines the foundation of America's recent trade strategy. Chinese negotiators are preparing to leverage this moment to seek more favorable terms and to press for a more stable trading environment. Around the globe, journalists and analysts are watching intently, trying to determine whether this decision marks a true shift in U.S. trade relations or is simply a temporary pause in ongoing tensions. The world is eager for signs of lasting change. Relief is real, especially among business leaders and investors, but the sense of caution remains strong. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, and many are waiting to see if the U.S. will follow through on its commitments. The global trading system now stands at a crossroads, facing both the promise of renewed cooperation and the challenge of overcoming past divisions. The decisions made in the coming months will shape the future of international commerce for years to come. The numbers tell a compelling story about the impact of tariffs and what happens when they're lifted. Behind every policy decision, there are real-world consequences that ripple through the economy, affecting businesses, workers, and consumers alike. By examining the data, we can begin to understand the true scale of these changes. After the tariffs were imposed, U.S. steel imports dropped by nearly 25%, a dramatic shift that reshaped supply chains. At the same time, domestic steel prices surged by over 40%, making it more expensive for manufacturers to source materials and produce goods. These higher costs didn't just affect companies, they were passed down to everyday Americans. According to a Federal Reserve study, the tariffs resulted in a net loss of 75,000 U.S. jobs as industries struggled to adapt and consumers faced higher prices on everything from cars to appliances. Retaliatory tariffs from trading partners hit U.S. agriculture especially hard. In just 1 year, American agricultural exports to China were slashed by more than half, leaving farmers with unsold crops and empty silos and rural communities facing economic uncertainty. Now, with the end of Section 232 tariffs, economists predict a brighter outlook. Over the next 2 years, U.S. GDP is expected to grow by 0.2%. Input costs for manufacturers should fall, and exports are likely to rebound, giving a much-needed boost to the economy. As domestic steel prices decline, Manufacturers will benefit from lower costs, potentially increasing production and hiring. However, U.S. steel producers may face new challenges as competition intensifies, forcing them to innovate and adapt. The World Trade Organization has linked these tariffs to a broader global trade slowdown. Their removal is expected to stimulate international commerce, encouraging investment and growth across borders. Trade flows between the U.S. and the European Union are projected to rebound quickly, restoring vital economic connections and opening new opportunities for businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. Still, the transition won't be easy for everyone. Industries that relied on protection from foreign competition may struggle to adjust, facing tough choices about jobs, investment, and the future of their businesses. Yet, with disruption comes opportunity. The economic shift will challenge old ways of doing business, but it also paves the way for innovation, growth, and new jobs in emerging sectors. Ultimately, the data underscores just how complex and far-reaching major trade policy changes can be. Every number tells a story, and together, they reveal the profound impact of economic decisions on our world. The Supreme Court's decision has reignited fierce debate in Washington. Free trade advocates in Congress praised the ruling as a return to constitutional norms and pledged new legislation to clarify trade law. Populists and labor-aligned lawmakers condemned the decision, vowing to restore presidential authority over tariffs. The White House faces a dilemma. It must craft a new trade strategy without the leverage of broad tariffs. The ruling will shape the 2026 midterms, forcing candidates to take sides on trade. The political fallout will echo for years, influencing both parties' platforms. The battle over America's trade future is just beginning. The stakes for workers, industries, and the global economy couldn't be higher. The Supreme Court's decision closes one era of American trade policy and opens another. Broad, unilateral tariffs justified by national security are off the table. The ruling restores Congress's authority, but leaves unresolved the challenges of global competition and industrial security. Policymakers must now find new, legally sound tools to protect U.S. industries. Expect a shift toward multilateral action, modernized trade laws, and targeted industrial policy. The debate between open markets and protecting domestic interests is more urgent than ever. The court has drawn a new legal boundary, but the economic and political questions remain. America stands at a crossroads, forced to rethink its approach to global trade. The future of U.S. economic security will be shaped by the choices made in this new era.